It's not about the company and whether you should stay there or not. It's about where you're going. When I wrote my book, it was very important that we have an ethics chapter because so many business books don't use the word ethics anywhere in the book. And ethics, unfortunately, is the redhead stepchild of these skills because companies say they want it, but it's the lowest on their list from what I've seen.
Welcome to the Be Better broadcast. Today, we are speaking with Mark Herschberg. And for those who don't know Mark is the author of the Career Toolkit, Essential Skills for Success That No One Taught You, and the creator of the Brain Bump app. Educated at MIT, Mark has spent his career launching and fixing new ventures at startups, Fortune 500 companies, and academia. He's developed new digital media, online marketplaces, new authentication systems, and he's even tracked criminals and terrorists on the dark web. Mark has helped create MIT's Career Success Accelerator, where he's taught now for 20 years. So if there's a guy who knows about building your career, it is Mark. When you take even one piece of value or strategy or insight away from this conversation with Mark, all that we ask is you please share this show with just one other person who could use it as well. You are the reason the Be Better broadcast has grown to over 350 episodes over the past 3 years because you are the best part of the Be Better team. Without further ado, the man himself, all the way from New York City, only about 3 hours from me. Mark, it's great to have you on the show, sir.
Well, thanks for having me on. It is my pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. I'm excited to talk with you because everyone listening right now, they want to know, how can I build my career in this new modern landscape? And I've got a lot I want to ask you about it. So let's preface this by asking, what aren't we taught when it comes to building a successful career in today's landscape?
Sadly, just about everything. When I open the book, I talk about the following. Think of a skill like networking. We've all heard about networking. I remember my parents said this is important. My teacher said this is important. I've told people it was important. Everyone says it's important. But has anyone actually sat down with you and said, here's how to do it? We've had more training in how to tie our shoes than in a skill like networking. And so when we started the program 20 some years ago, we looked at a number of skills that corporations were asking for. And I've seen reports, not just from MIT, from other universities, from big recruiting agencies, from all sorts of different groups. It's always the same list. Now, the list might be 5 to 50 in length because it depends how you define the buckets. I broke into 10 buckets. So here are the 10 skills that I don't see us generally teaching people that we should. So the 10 buckets: career plans, how to create and execute a career plan to get to where you want. Office place skills like managing your manager, understanding corporate culture, corporate politics, understanding how you add value. Interviewing. Now you might be saying, wait a second, no, there's lots on interviewing. There's lots on how to be a candidate. And yes, that's an important skill, but many of us have to hire other people. Certainly when we're managers, even our peers, we get pulled into hiring, no training. None whatsoever. And we sit there and go, well, I don't know, I kind of think this candidate's good. We need to teach people how to be more rigorous and formal in that approach. Then leadership and management. I break down management into two pieces: the people side of management and the process side of management. That probably we do touch on those three skills. Certainly we see that in MBA programs, but not so much at the undergraduate level. And I know people, even MBA programs, who say, yeah, I got the theory, but boy, that wasn't helpful. And then the last four skills: communication, networking, negotiations, and ethics. And again, whether you do 10 buckets or 50 or 5, it's all kind of the same skills.
So, okay, so let's dive into some of those. What ethics specifically? So what is ethics? How is ethics considered a skill?
Ethics is something. Now, when I wrote my book, it was very important that we have an ethics chapter because so many business books don't use the word ethics anywhere in the book. And ethics, unfortunately, is the redhead stepchild of these skills because companies say they want it, but it's the lowest on their list from what I've seen. So you're asking, how does it come into play? Let's look at issues like OceanGate. We're recording this in early 2024. Last year, of course, we had OceanGate. We had a guy say, oh, I'm an expert and I'm going to ignore what other people in the field say because I think I know better. And he ignored safety regulations and he brought people down into the ocean where unfortunately they passed away. Let's look at companies that say, you know what? We might get caught on this and we might pay a fine, but so what? Economically, it makes sense for us to do this. It's ethically wrong, but economically right. And so we just care about the economics. And that's why we run into problems. And I think we need to really emphasize ethics because it's important for us as a society. And companies say they want it, they don't always follow through, but we can rise up and really say ethics matter to us.
So to even give another example on that, you mentioned OceanGate. Well, even Apple, to give a big example of the largest company in the world, $1 trillion company or almost $1 trillion company, Apple came out years ago saying that they intentionally slowed down the iPhones after about 3 years. And they paid millions and millions in fines every single year because of this, but they've continued to do it and just it's the cost of doing business for them, right? And people know, oh, my iPhone's going to slow down after 3 years because they intentionally start to slow down the software. So would that fit under the same bucket of intentionally doing something you know isn't right, but you're doing it as a business move and paying in terms of money as a consequence?
Well, I suppose if you said ahead of time, hey, everyone, here's what will happen with the product,
Okay.
and they know it ahead of time, sure, then that's not unethical. You're saying this is how it works, or my product will stop working one day after 3 years. You're like, all right, do I want to get it for 3 years? We call that a lease. But
Okay.
if you don't tell people and you intentionally degrade your product, certainly that feels misleading. People aren't expecting that from you. And maybe you could argue, well, that's our brand. That's what we're known for. I'd say that's more of a gray area, but we
Hmm.
certainly see in other cases where it's really a lot worse. Harassment, of course, is something that is far too prevalent, and this happens all the time. We need to really cut down that. Thankfully, at the time we're recording again, 2024, we're now after Me Too has come out, after other things, we're really pushing forward. We're working on DEI, but we need to do better in many of these cases. And that comes down to important ethics training. When it comes to ethics, I do an analogy to safety and fire safety. We've all done fire drills. I remember back in elementary school and high school, and even some of my offices, we've done fire drills. Now, I've been in buildings where the fire alarm has gone off, and it's been amazing because no one pushes and shoves. No one says, oh, I'm running for my life. Get out of my way. We all know, walk calmly to the stairs. Don't take the elevator. Do this, and we will get out. And even in bigger emergencies I've heard of, we've seen people be calm. And it's because we've had that training. But when you get into an ethical situation, you've had no training, you start to panic, you start to worry. And so you do start to cross the lines. If we can help people with just a little bit of ethical training, when they start to get into those areas, when the alarms go off, they can rely on that training and say, we're going to walk calmly. Yes, there's a problem, but we don't have to lose our heads about it. But unfortunately, we do none of that.
Yeah, no, very true. I could ask you a lot more about ethics specifically too, but I want to touch on these other ones also. So it blows my mind how we're not taught about these things in school. And I graduated high school in 2012, to give you an example. And we never had a class on how to do an interview, how to be interviewed, how to interview other people. We never did a class on leadership, the difference between leadership and management. We never learned any of these things. And even when I went into the corporate world when I was 18 years old, I started as a salesperson at the very bottom of the ladder, and I started to move into leadership, right? I wasn't a leader at that time. I was a young man. I didn't understand anything about management or leadership. I just wanted the title, right? I wanted to be the man. And I moved into those roles and I was like, I got the title now. This is it. I'm where I wanted to be. And surely because of that mentality, I got bumped right back down. And this happened several times. I could never maintain a leadership position until finally I was 21 years old. And my boss at the time looked at me and he's like, Brandon, you're not ever going to be a leader in this company until you can learn to lead yourself. right? And I was overweight. I was unhappy. I had all these other problems in my life. My home wasn't in order. And in order to help lead other people, your home has to be in order first. And even when I then moved into leadership, when my home was in order, I had to learn all these skills through experience, through crashing and burning. Even at this company, a large company, Verizon Wireless, there wasn't anything in place at the time to help you to learn to be a leader, to help you to learn how to interview, to help you create career goals. I remember I delivered a workshop one time, Mark, of how to set goals. And everyone loved it. There was about 50 participants. Everyone had a great time. Everyone had goals. They felt great. They came up to me afterwards talking to me about their goals. And a few months later, one of the top guys said, Brandon, we got to focus more on training them on sales and not how to set goals. And I was like, well, they're not going to want to sell more if they don't have any goals for their career. If they don't know where they want to go, they're not going to be motivated to perform at their best. And he's like, Brandon, we're a sales company. We got to focus on sales. So why are we so afraid or lacking in teaching these very important principles across companies? And you must hear this, instructing at MIT, you must speak with these corporate companies. Like, why are we not teaching these things, Mark? Why is there still in 2024 a giant career gap?
There are 3 causes of this for the 3 areas where we could potentially do training. High school is one, primary school through high school. This is a relatively modern invention that goes back to the 19th century. It's when we were taking people off the farms, because on the farm, boys learned what dad did and girls learned what mom did, and that was all you needed to know. And once we started getting people off the farms and into into industry, which at the time was factory floors, we had to teach them basic skills. We had to teach them reading, writing, arithmetic. We had to make sure you could read the do not touch sharp blade. We had to give them some basic background so they could be a productive member of society in these large communities we built in. But you didn't need networking skills or leadership to work on the factory floor. So we didn't need to teach this to people. They just needed to have the basic skills. And that's the history from which our primary through high school education system begins. And we're stuck in that mentality. Now, the university system, that goes back 1,000 years. And the university system, it's run by professors, very smart people, but professors are people who are very narrow and deep. And so what happens is when you go to college and you say, well, I want to study marketing, the experts, the professors say, well, we who know the field say, take these intro courses and these mid-level courses and a few senior courses. And if you do all this, along with some general requirements, because the college wants you to take a math, a history, whatever, we don't care about that. If you do all this, we'll give you a piece of paper that says you have achieved this level of knowledge in marketing or accounting or history or whatever your field is. It doesn't say you're a good marketer. It certainly doesn't say you're a good employee. They're just saying you've acquired this level of knowledge. That's all we are admitting to. And that was fine circa 1950 when you were a cog in a machine. I always envision that corporate environment, the rows of people sitting at their desk, you got the inbox and outbox, and you sat there and said, yes, sir, what next, sir? Take in your inbox, do the work, put in your outbox. Again, networking wasn't as critical. Leadership wasn't as critical. You were a cog. You just had to turn your cog. And so it wasn't until the last anywhere from about 30 to 40 years, as we got rid of middle management during a lot of the restructuring in the 80s or so, that's where we started to say, it's no longer you're a cog, you're working in interdisciplinary teams. In fact, today, you can imagine a situation where you have a 50-year-old head of marketing, and he turns to his 23-year-old junior marketer and says, explain TikTok to me, because I don't know what we're supposed to do. And it's no longer that the person at the top knows more than everyone underneath him. The final area, corporate training. Unfortunately, corporations don't want to invest long-term. And we have cut corporate training budgets. Every time there's been a recession, that's the first thing to get cut. And so corporations don't invest either. And so all 3 of these areas, for different reasons, really have not invested. Although I've argued repeatedly, we should do this investment. It's going to give us an incredible ROI.
What a massive shame to hear that corporations cut the training budget. when that should be the one thing that's always growing, no matter the times you're in. If there's a bad time, train your people so that you can overcome that bad time. You're right, though. I do believe we're headed in the right direction. We've got people like you. We've got you who wrote your book, by the way, which is a fantastic book, which is called The Career Toolkit. And there's people out there talking about these things. So my question for you is, your career specifically had a lot of twists and turns, and now you're the man who wrote this book that's behind you for people watching. I can imagine you weren't taught about these things either. I can imagine that you learned these things through stumbling around. And I just want to go back to your intro, because you've done a lot of fascinating things in a lot of different areas. You've launched and fixed new ventures at startup companies. You're currently involved in several startup companies, from what you've told me. You've worked inside of Fortune 500. You've worked inside of academia. You've developed new digital media, online marketplaces, authentication systems. And this was also something that struck me. You've tracked criminals and terrorists on the dark web. How that goes along with those other things, I'm not sure. Maybe you can tell us. But this leads into the question of, did you ever expect that your career would take the twists and turns that it took? Did you plan for these things at the beginning? And this goes into the idea of career planning. And the reason I ask you is, did you expect your career to go in this direction?
Yes and no. So let me talk about career planning in general, and then I'll talk about how I applied it to mine.
Okay.
What trips people up with career planning? Consider the following. Imagine your boss said to you, here's a big project. It's January 1st. Here's a project. You need to finish it by the end of the year. What would you do? Would you say, okay, great. Why don't I see you December 31st and we'll see how it goes? That's insanity. Your boss would not accept that. Your boss is going to say, no, I want to see a plan. And I want us to do check-ins to see how you're doing. Now, we all know a few things about this plan. The plan won't be as detailed further out as it is today. You need to know what you're doing next week and maybe this month very clearly. You don't know what you're doing on October 17th. That's too far out. But you know roughly where you need to be in October to be finished by December 31st. You have a plan, clearer up front, more placeholders further out. We also know whatever plan you have is not going to work out exactly as you planned. Okay. But this is what trips people up, because they say, well, how do I know where I'm going to be in 4 years, in 10 years? I can't figure this out. So their plan is, well, I hope to get promoted in 8 years. And that's it. That's the plan. I'll see you in 8 years. Hopefully I get the promotion. But that's insanity. Instead, we need to do what we do for our projects. We need to create a plan, say, this is where I'm trying to go. If I want to be here in 15 years, where do I need to be in 12? Where do I need to be in 8? In 3? And we can back that out. It's clearer, closer. I don't know exactly what I'm doing in year 9. I don't even know what company I'll be at. But in the next year, I know these are the skills I need to develop. And here's how I'm doing it. I'm going to be on these projects. I'm taking this class. I'm getting this mentoring. I'm working on this concretely. And then in a year, do I need to do more of that, or am I okay? I move on to something else. So when it came to my career, I knew where I wanted to be. I knew I wanted to be a CTO, a chief technology officer. I recognized there was a gap in my skills. I was decent at the engineering. I could still get better. But all these other skills, the ones we've been talking about, no one taught me. They weren't taught to me in school. We didn't have podcasts like this. I was very much on my own. And so I set out to develop these skills. So that part was very intentional. I said, I want to become a CTO. And how do I do that? I need to get to here, to here, to here.
Let me pause you there. So how did you know that you wanted to be a CTO? At what age were you when you said, I want to be a chief technology officer?
That was probably sometime in my early 20s. Like many people, I went through different phases. I want to be a stockbroker when I was very young, then a physicist. Then I recognized there are better opportunities in software. And so went in that direction. But when I came out of school, I was still, well, I guess I'll do software, but I didn't have clear goals. And it did take me a few years to figure that out. And don't worry if you don't know exactly where you want to go. There are questions that you can ask yourself to help develop your direction. Those, by the way, I give away for free. They're on the website. So you can download those questions from the resources page and just start thinking through it, or talking through it with peers and mentors and people you trust. And that's going to help orient you.
What's one of those questions, if you could give us a powerful question now that we can ask ourselves that would give us some insight on where we want to go?
Well, these are questions. Some of them are work related. How do I want to spend my day? Do you want to be managing other people or managed by people, working alone, working in teams? Do you want a fixed schedule, 9 to 5, and I go home at 5 o'clock and I am done, versus one that has more flexibility, but maybe you will be doing some work at 10 o'clock at night? There's lots of personal issues. How much money do you need? Do you need 3 different homes, or are you okay with one? Where do you want to live? If you want to really rise up in the financial services world, you're probably not going to be living in Tulsa, Oklahoma. You need to be in New York or London or somewhere else. So there's a whole bunch of questions. Most of them are really about your lifestyle, because unfortunately, so many people, they focus on their career and then try to squeeze in their life.
Mm,
Really, we need to focus on our life and make sure our career fits into the life we want.
very interesting. I absolutely love this. So you mentioned earlier too that you look ahead 15 years and say, who do I want to be in 15 years? Not what position in the company do I want to be, because you might not even be with that same company. And I love how you said that, because one of my questions was going to say, should we be planning for 10 to 12 to 15 years with the same company? So my question is, when do you know it's time to move on from a company that maybe you've been with a company for 10, 11, 12? I've been with the company I'm with for 11 years now. Since I was 18 years old, I'm almost 30 years old. I've been with the same company, and I've built and grown with that company. But how do you know when it's time to move on to the next? Because we're in a different world now, where we used to work for one company for 50 years, retire, get the gold watch. Awesome. Right. But now we're in a different world. Now people are hopping from one place to another. Some maybe hopping too much. But how do you know when it's time to move on?
I'll first note the long-term 50 years with the company is actually a little bit of a myth. My friend Jeff Wald wrote a book called The End of Jobs, and he's shown the data says we actually move jobs just about as much today as we did years ago. It was slightly
Really?
longer years ago, but it wasn't this, I'm with the company for years on end. But
Interesting.
we do see that with some of the bigger corporate companies. When I consulted to Sears, I met people who had been there 20, 30 years. And so that's where we thought about the big corporations circa 1950, 1960. That's where the myth comes from.
Okay.
To your question, it's not about the company and whether you should stay there or not. It's about where you're going. So I'll give you an example. Early in my career, I didn't have a lot of direction. And one day my boss came in and he said to me, well, this may surprise you or maybe not, but I'm leaving the company. I'm going out to do my own. I'm taking some of the engineers with me, and we'd love for you to come. And the people who were staying also sat me down and said, hey, we know he's leaving. He probably approached you. We want you to stay. I said, well, how do I make this decision? And I started to ask myself, both of them, obviously, they pay me well. I like the people. But there's more. It's not just what I have today. Where am I going? Which job is going to take me in that direction? I thought about, I want to be a CTO, which one's going to help develop me and get me there? And compensation could have been part of it. I didn't think it would be in this case. Of course, then I realized I had more than two options. And I started looking at other jobs and went somewhere else where I said, this is the best way to advance to where I want to go. So all of us need to sit down and say, let me think about my career. And here's something specific you can do right now. Now, you might pause the podcast for a second, but you have to come back and you take out your cell phone and you put a note, create a calendar event that says, think about my career and its future, and set that as a recurring meeting for every 6 months. So now you're never going more than 6 months without sitting down for maybe 30 minutes and saying, let me think about, where am I today? Where am I trying to go? And am I still on the right path? Or are there better paths I could take, whether a different role at this company or a role at another company? And so that's how you want to focus on this question. It's not about should you stay at this company or not. It's, is this job moving you forward? Yes or no? I will say I have an article called, Let's Be Honest, This Job Isn't Going to Last Forever. And I am honest with my employees. And we talk about the fact that in 10 years, they're not going to be at the company. Probably I won't be either. In fact, it's not even 10 years. We use 10 years because it feels far enough in the future.
Mm-hmm.
I've talked with employees where even they say, look, in 2 years, I want to be somewhere else. And I'm okay having that conversation because my job is to support them in their goals. And what I don't want to have happen, if they want to move somewhere else, they want to move somewhere else. Maybe I can try and convince them, but if I can't, so be it. But if I know they're going, I can help plan and replace instead of one day showing up and seeing an empty desk.
True. I love that. No, that's powerful. So let's talk to young Mark, who is beginning his corporate career, or beginning his career journey in general. And you've got a lot of young men, a lot of young women out there out of school. They're building something. Maybe they have an entrepreneurial mindset, but they want to develop the skills inside of the company first, whatever it may be. They're starting off. Okay. You mentioned a lot of these different skills, right? Career planning, management, leadership, communications, ethics, the list goes on. Where would you recommend these individuals begin in terms of building their career journey? And to add on to this, you mentioned earlier waiting for a promotion, right? If you know that this is where I want to be in 10 years, these are the skills I have to improve at. These skills involve me being inside of leadership, but I'm new to this company, or maybe I'm just not sure how to move into leadership at this company. Does one wait for a promotion? Does one wait for that conversation? How does one have the ambition to move up and ask for what it is that they want inside of the company?
It's exactly that. And I have some articles that get more into detail on this. But you need to ask these questions when you think about your project. You say, well, here we are in this year-long project we've been talking about. We're here in June. Here's where we need to be December 31st. What's the gap? What's the work remaining? And how do we close that gap? And the same thing applies to your job. If you want to get this job next, and it might be a specific role at the company, it might be just in general, I know I want to be a director and it generally looks like this. I don't have a job description, but you can know, even if there's not a specific job description, you can look at similar jobs. You can talk to people at your company or other company in those levels and ask them, what do you need to do to succeed? And so now you look at that set of skills and you look at where you are and you define that skills gap. You can have this conversation with your manager. Your manager should be able to have it. Unfortunately, many do not. And if your manager can't have it, you're on your own to figure it out. But then you say, here is the skills gap. So let's take sales as an example. You're an individual salesperson. You're doing well. You've got good sales numbers. You say, I want to be a director of sales. What do you need to do to be a director? Well, you've got the good sales skills, but there might be some other skills needed, like opening a new territory. It might be managing other people, saying, well, I haven't done that. Maybe I'm confident I can do that. Maybe I think I'll be a good manager, but no one has seen me do it. So how can you gain that skill? And it might be, you say, I'm going to work on one of the other corporate projects, maybe some charity initiative, and I'll lead that team and I'll show my management skills. Maybe it's you take a class and get a certificate and say, see, I've got a certificate showing I know how to manage. Maybe it's just in conversations with the people who can promote you to convince them that you have those skills. As for the opening the territory, you might say, okay, I'm going to ask, in addition to my own work, is there something I can do? I'd like to help start a territory. I know I can't run it yet, but I'll open it up. We'll hand it to someone else, but that's going to check the box and show what I've done. So once you look at what that skills gap is, you need to be proactive in closing that gap. Because when you want to apply for the job, you want to say, see everything you need, check, check, check. I've done it all. I've shown you. And now you have confidence promoting me.
What's up, Be Better family? It's Brandon Eastman here. And as a thank you for tuning in to the Be Better broadcast, I want to give you a very special gift. For a limited time, you can get a free digital copy of my book titled Be Extraordinary, Your Guide to Self-Mastery. This book is packed with insights and actionable steps that will help you to unlock your fullest potential in the 5 key areas of your life. But that's not all. Along with the book, I also want to give you the audiobook version absolutely free. Imagine having the power to transform your life right at your fingertips and in your ears, anytime, anywhere. Go grab your copy at bebetterindustriescom/book. You'll also find the link in the episode show notes. Go and grab your copy and join me in making a positive impact on the world. Now back to the show. I love that. So you're doing the things that are involved in a role such as that before you're actually in the role itself. And that is so important. There was this gentleman I worked with a long time ago where he wanted the role that I was in along with my partner at the time. And rather than just say, can I please move into your role? You know, can I do this? Can I do that? He actually started to drive out to the training center on his own whim, on his own days off. He wasn't even asking to get paid. Obviously we paid him, but he wasn't asking to get paid. He came and he helped. He took the trashes out at the end of the day. He answered questions for the other trainees in the room. He did all these things to the point where 3-4 months later, we were like looking at our watches if he wasn't there at the normal time. And we're like, hopefully he shows up because we need him at this point. Like, we're so used to having him here. Like, he's been such a huge help. And then when the day came, which believe it or not, was 3 years later, he did this for 3 years, this guy, and fantastic. He's still a great friend of mine to this day. Finally, he was the only shoe-in for the role. Like, we had like 10 applicants, but he was the only person. We pretty much just put the application out for legality because we knew it was going to be this guy who's been putting in the initiative. And when we called the other people to tell them, hey, at this time you weren't selected, it's like they understood because they weren't doing these things. They weren't doing the role without the title like this individual was. So I love your advice. Ask for what you want. And again, like you said, hopefully you have someone that will listen to you, that will help you grow into that role. What if someone doesn't have a manager or a leader above them what if they say, just keep doing what you're doing. When the time comes, we'll let you know. What if they have someone who just brushes them off? Like, what do you do at that point?
First thing is you recognize that's a red flag. That's a manager who either doesn't care about you or isn't a competent manager who can help you. And so first question is, do you want to invest more time working for this manager? And there's a bunch of things that can go into whether that's a yes or a no. But as we said before, you might be able to get the information elsewhere, maybe from HR. Maybe there are peer managers who you can turn to for guidance and input, or you really do find it on your own, perhaps outside of the company. What are the next steps? What are the things you're looking for? Because remember, that next rung on the ladder might be at your current company. It might be at another company. In fact, even if you're trying to get at your current company, we all know between now and whenever you're ready, things can happen. Your company can have setbacks. There could be macroeconomic problems. And so that role may not exist in the future. You might have to find it somewhere else. So don't have your heart set just on that one job. Just say, in general, to get to this level, here's what I need to do. In fact, even if your manager does give you the answers, I'd still get input from other people because your manager might be a little focused just on your company and you want to look and get other opinions and aspects to it.
Yeah, you're right. It's about asking different questions of who else can I speak to in order to make it to that level? Who else can I get advice from? Where else can I get this information? How else can I develop and grow? Excellent advice. So let's talk about another one of those skills on your list. Let's talk about networking. Okay. Networking is something that this term was alien to me until I started my business in 2019. So at this point, I'm in business inside of a corporation for 7 years, but we never were taught about networking, never learned about it. Like, I knew the people inside of the company, which about 300 people in upstate New York, but I never networked outside of the business. Right. And I never knew that people actually got together to solely network. And I know that sounds crazy, but to me, I was like, why would I go to a networking event? What's the value in that? Why would I go on these online virtual networking events? What is networking to you and what is its value? Because obviously it's a very valuable thing if it made it onto your list of skills to develop.
Most people get this wrong. And I will tell you, I don't go to purely networking events. We can circle back to that. For most people, networking is, oh, I'm going to meet people. I'm going to add them to my Rolodex or now my social media contacts, and then I can call and ask for things. And we see people do this so badly. I've been at events where there's that canonical networker who goes into a room and comes back an hour later with 15 business cards. Or the person who says, hey, nice to meet you. Hi, I'm looking for a job. Do you have this job for me? No. Okay, great. Next. Hey, nice to meet you. I'm looking for a job. Can you help me? No. Okay, next. They're just running around, just going, give me, give me, give me. Networking is about relationships, pure and simple. It's building a relationship. If you have ever made a friend, you know how to network. What screws people up is we think it means meeting lots of people, and introverts especially get scared. They say, oh my God, I have to go in this conference room and meet lots of people. No, that's one way to do it. But remember, meeting people is only the first step. It is relationship building. Consider if I'm on a dating app, I'm going swipe, swipe, swipe. I swipe right and she swipes right. I go, oh, look, I just swiped right with this girl, Chris. Great. Chris and I, this is it. She's the one. We're getting married. Say, Mark, slow down. You both swiped right. That's good. There's interest. You're not in a relationship with her, right? You just swipe right. Now, what do? You have to go date her. You have to build that relationship. When you meet someone at an event, whether it's an event in a room of 1,000 people, or you meet someone one-on-one, or you somehow start talking to someone online through LinkedIn or somewhere else, that's the swiping right. Adding someone on social media, that's swiping right. You now have to build that relationship, and that takes time. And so we need to shift from the mindset of what can I get to how do I build this relationship? Just use one more analogy. Imagine you and I were sitting in a bar, we start talking, we kind of hit it off. Okay, yeah, you're a cool guy. Say, listen, really great hanging out with you. This weekend, I'm moving out of my apartment. So why don't you come over? We're going to carry my couch and furniture down 3 flights of stairs. So come on, you had a good time with me tonight. Don't you want to come and spend your Saturday doing that? You're going to say, Mark, this was fun, but no, we don't know each other that well. But if we've been best friends from high school and I said, I need your help this weekend, of course you're going to be there. And it's because you're best friend from high school, you've built that relationship over time. And so we need to think of networking the same way. Meet people, build the relationship, and once the relationship's in place, then we can start asking for favors from each other. I'll mention one last thing. Most people think of networking for job hunting. Yes, you can find jobs. You can also find candidates. You can find suppliers. You can find partners. You can get information, which is usually the most valuable thing. Don't think of your network as my network is here for jobs. Your network is a resource. The way I think of it, if you ask me right now, you said, Mark, what's the fastest land mammal? I don't know, but I've got my cell phone with me and I'm going to pull up my cell phone. I'm going to look it up because I carry the internet with me that has a lot of answers.
Yep.
Well, you can ask me another question. I might not know the answer, but I have my cell phone with all my contacts and I carry my network with me. And just like I might turn to the internet, I might turn to my network for help with a problem. And that's how we need to think about our network.
So we have limited time, right? So how, in the limited time that we have all these job responsibilities. How do you know if a person is worth investing the time to build the relationship, especially inside of these big companies? How do you know when to spend your time to build the relationship?
I have this same challenge being single in New York and going on dates. I only have so much time. And sometimes I'd go on a date and she'd be great and we'd move forward. And sometimes we'd go on a date and no. Sometimes I knew that in 5 minutes and said I should have filtered a little better before the date. It's the same thing. There's a bunch of people. Sometimes you get an impression of someone within a few minutes. Wow, that person, he is a jerk. Or she seems really nice. And then you invest more time with one and not the other. And that's it. And it will take time. You cannot instantly speed up or bypass that relationship building. You just have to use your judgment. Who are the people you want to invest time with and who are the ones you don't?
Great example. The beauty of networking too is you never know when your network is going to come to your aid. I've met people now who I've known for 5 to 6 years in the business world. And all of a sudden I get an email or I get a text message or I get a phone call of, hey, we need you at this event. Can you make it? Hey, we want you on the podcast. Hey, can I come on your show? And then, hey, I'm starting this new venture. I need someone to help my sales team. Can you come in and do that? Like, again, networking isn't about getting, right? Because before you get, you're giving, you're checking in, you're asking how you can help them, you're serving them however you can, but you can never bet or even have any glimpse of understanding of how your network is going to come to your aid. It really comes back down to that phrase that you don't know what you don't know. Right. And it's not about asking for things and getting things. Sometimes you'll ask your network for things, but really it's what you're receiving when you least expect it. That is the beauty of networking.
I think of my network karmically. If I just put good out into it, if I try to help others, it will come back to me. I
Mm.
do not keep score. Unless someone has repeatedly said no, no, no to me, I might start to notice a trend here. And I do have people where I said, wow, every time I ask, even small asks, they keep saying no. They're probably not going to be helped by me in the future. But otherwise, I just say, hey, if I can help you, and when I meet someone, the first thing I think is, how can I help this person? Now, it doesn't mean I'm going to show up on Saturday and help them carry their furniture down 3 flights of stairs. But if there's some simple thing I can do to help, I start by giving rather than showing up and asking and taking.
100%. And the more you build your network, the better you get at doing this. You start to immediately just see connections. Oh, you need this? Well, I know this person. I know this person. You might not help carry the furniture, but you're like, hey, my friend Jim Bob has a moving company, and let me give him a call. Let me see if he's free on that day. We'll work something out. Something like that. You solving their problem, or even just you providing a convenience to someone else. When you provide a convenience, you're winning the heart of those people. And like you said, karmically, everything comes back to you, right? Those who support life grow. That's just the way that it works. So, okay, so we talked about networking, and we touched on that. And I'm sure you have so much more in your book. Again, Mark's book, guys, is called The Career Toolkit, and there's links in the description to go grab this for yourself. Let's talk about negotiation. What are the keys to negotiation? Because negotiation is one thing. Again, we're not taught how to sell. And selling is the lifeblood of any business. Selling is the lifeblood of any career. What are the keys to effective negotiation, and why do they matter?
First, I want to emphasize how important this skill is, although we're going to see it applies to all the skills. Imagine you're 25 years old and you know nothing about negotiating, but you go and learn. Whether you read my book, a different book, take a class, whatever, you invest tens to hundreds of dollars, a few hours of time. And then for your next job, you're getting your next job, you get a job offer for, let's just say, $60,000. But instead of taking it, you say, wait, I know how to negotiate. And you negotiate for just $1,000 more. That seems very doable. It's not a huge amount. It will take you 5 or 10 minutes to negotiate. If you do that, you get that $1,000 more, and you do nothing else in your career. You stay at that job for the next 40 years. That little effort, the hour of reading the book, the 5 minutes of negotiating, it got you $1,000 more, has now gotten you $1,000 more for the next 40 years. In a few minutes, you just earned $40,000. Huge ROI. But of course, you're not going to stay at that job. You will have raises, promotions, and other jobs, and you will increase more than $1,000. So the ROI on learning to negotiate is massive. It can add 6 figures to your lifetime income, no problem. And that's just income. Now, I mentioned this for negotiation because we can do the math. The same, by the way, applies to all the other skills. If you're a little better at networking, what opportunities will that bring you? If you're a little better at leadership, it will help you get promoted faster. It's just harder to do the math. But here's the other thing about networking. We're using straight numbers, salary in this case, but you do the same thing for sales. If every sales contract was 1% better, what does that do for you? What does that do for the company? Huge ROI.
Mm.
But negotiations, we think about salaries and sales as a primary area. We negotiate all the time. We negotiate with coworkers, with partners, with our manager. And if all of those can get a little bit better, again, it's not necessarily quantitative. It's your manager saying, I need you to work extra hard to hit this deadline. And you saying, well, I can do that. I need some extra time off with my kids. And you negotiate, okay, I'll do this, but can I have this extra Friday off? Say, okay, yes, we can make that trade off. you've just negotiated. Everyone wins. It might not be, here's a dollar for dollar amount.
Yeah.
So learning to negotiate creates improvements in all these interactions. So now you asked, how do you get better?
Mm-hmm.
The first and most important thing is to prepare. So many people just show up. They just walk into the room and say, okay, time to negotiate. Think of any sports team. You watch that sports team when they show up right as the game begins. But long before they set foot on the field, they have been doing training. They have been doing preparation, running drills, planning what their strategy is for the game, analyzing what the other team is going to do. And that's what you need to do. Even a little bit of preparation can produce a much better return. So invest for every minute you expect to spend negotiating, invest at least that much time preparing. And realistically, probably it's going to be 2 to 5 times that amount.
Yeah.
The bigger the negotiation, the more preparation you need to do. So that's the first thing. There's other things we can get into as well.
That's awesome. I love that. I like how if you're going to spend 1 minute in that negotiation, practice for 5 minutes. It goes back to, I used to deliver public speaking trainings to leadership, and communication is one of your keys too. And I'm sure you'd agree with this. And if not, let me know. But for every minute of your 30-minute presentation, you should be preparing for 10 minutes, right? It's the 1 to 10 rule. Prepare for 10 minutes for every minute. And people used to see that and go, what? That's crazy. But it's really easy to fill that time, right? Write out the structure of your conversation. Write out where you're going to have engagement. Practice the presentation, right? All that adds up to that 10 minutes per. So if you're doing a 30-minute presentation, you've got a lot more. You've got 300 minutes of just preparing for that presentation. So I love the preparation aspect. Another thing that I would add in there is the exact examples that you gave. If you want to help them reach that deadline, say, hey, I'm going to need this Friday off. I'm going to need this Friday off. A lot of people just say, okay, yes, sounds good. I'll do it. And then after they agree to it, they're like, oh man, I really wish I had a Friday off. This is really overextending me. And then they go to their team or their coworkers and they complain, right? And you got that negative bug that spreads around the team. Ask and you shall receive. And even with this idea of preparation, you can prepare to ask for what it is you want. Know what it is you want so that when the opportunity arises, you are ready, right? Luck is when preparation meets opportunity. So ask, and you might not always get exactly what you want, but you're not going to get anything unless you ask for what it is you want.
So in that preparation, what you want to do, you want to think about your BATNA. That's your best alternative to negotiate agreement. That's your bottom line. That's the point where you say, you know what, if you can't do at least this, it doesn't make sense to do this contract, this agreement. And that's okay. Walking away without an agreement is still a success because you didn't get into a worse situation. But then you're going to think about, what's my ideal case? If I could get everything, what would I ask for? And I'm probably not going to get the ideal case, but what are some of the trade-offs? And what might be more valuable to me and less valuable to the other person? In sales, for example, you might think, oh, I can do faster delivery because that doesn't really cost my company anything because we have a warehouse full of widgets. So I can do earlier delivery at effectively no cost. But the person I'm selling to says, oh, sooner, that's valuable to me. So you're giving up little value. The other person's gaining high value. And then you can trade that off for something where maybe they can do net 15 instead of net 30 because your company says, oh, we need the cash. And they're saying, well, we've got a mountain of cash. We can pay quickly. You go, good, that's valuable to me. And they say, yeah, that doesn't really cost us anything. So you want to think about what's high value and low value to you, high value and low value to them. Now, that's speculative, but that's part of your research. And then what things can you trade off? And by having these things and having these options prepared, it's exactly that. When they propose something, you can say, okay, I know how to evaluate this. I know how to think about this and not, oh, I should have asked for that when I was in the room and I forgot.
Yeah.
It's all part of your preparation.
Yep, that's a lack of preparation. If you get in there and you're like, oh, I should have done this, I should have done that, right? Preparation will eliminate most, if not all, of those situations and circumstances like that. For more on these different career skills to grow your career, guys, check out the Career toolkit. Links are in the description to grab your copy of this book, as well as Mark's website. And I highly recommend you check out his website. Again, he's got articles on the website. He's got those questions that you can download that help you determine your career plan in general. There's a lot of free resources on there. And I highly recommend you invest the little amount to grab the career toolkit to dive into more of these, because again, we weren't taught about these things. One last thing I want to ask you, can you tell me about your app that you've developed? It's called Brain Bump, and there's going to be a link in the description for that as well. But what is Brain Bump? Can you give us an idea?
How many times do you read a book like mine and you say, wow, this is great, this is helpful, and then you forget 3 weeks later? Listening to a podcast right now, you might be driving to work, you might be at the gym, and how much of this are you going to remember in a day or two? Well, that's not helpful. We do this because we want to help you learn, and that means you need to retain it. And that's why I created Brain Bump. I was shocked this tool didn't exist. We know the best way to remember something is spaced repetition. That's why we studied in high school and we had flashcards, but we also had tests back then. And with no test, we're not going to do that. So how do we help you retain and use the information? Brain Bump takes the key ideas from books, blogs, podcasts, classes, talks. We provide a bunch, including all the tips from my book and other books. You can add your own if we don't have what you want yet. And the tip cards, are organized by topic. Think like hashtags. So you can use it one of two ways. Imagine you've heard some networking tips today. You may have read some in my book or in other sources. You're walking into a conference 3 months from now, and you're saying, I need those networking tips right now. What are they? I've forgotten them. You pull up the app, you tap networking as the topic, and there's all the tips. And you just flip through them 3 minutes before you walk into the room. And now they're all top of mind. You've got them all ready to use. So you get the information just in time. Or maybe you're a new leader or a new manager. You're saying, well, I've learned a lot. I've listened to these podcasts. I've read these books, but it's hard to remember all this. So every day at 9 a.m., you get what's effectively a daily affirmation. But instead of, believe in yourself, it's here's one of the pieces of advice. And by seeing it over and over, it's going to stay top of mind and you're going to retain it. And you can set that up. We don't send notifications unless you request it. So you might want that one at 9 a.m. If, for example, you also have trouble in your marriage, you want to get that tip at 6 p.m. The key is that you don't want the marriage tip at 9 a.m. as you walk into the office, or the leadership tip at 6 p.m. as you sit down with your spouse. So the key is that you get the information pulled to you so you get what you need when and where you need it. Unlike social media, where we just blast out information and you go, yeah, that's not relevant or that's useful, but I don't need that now. This, you control what you get and when you get. So it's always relevant, always helpful. And that's Brain Bump. It is completely free, 100% free. We don't track any information, free to download, free to get the content. And it works as a companion to my book, to many other books and podcasts and other sources.
That's so cool. I love that. Guys, go download that right now. That sounds amazing. I love the idea that it sends you what you need at the time that you need it. So like you said, you're not getting the business tip at 6 p.m. at the dinner table with little Johnny and your wife, right? So it's very valuable. And this is absolutely needed. And you get exactly what you need when you need it. So go download Brain Bump. Links are in the description, as well as Mark's book, The Career Toolkit. Mark, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you for diving deep into a few of these different skills. And I know we scraped the surface of them, but you're an accomplished man. You've done a lot of great things. You've given a lot of value. And I know our audience is going to take a lot from this as well. So thank you very much for being here this morning, sir.
Thanks for having me on the show.
Whether you are new to building your career, whether you are 5 to 10 years into building it, whether you're in your 30s or 40s and you're just looking for that edge to take your career to the next level, then I hope that these tips on career planning or networking or negotiation, or how to know when it's time to move on, how to have these conversations with your leadership to move up into that next role, to add value in some other way. I hope that this conversation was helpful for you the way that it is and was for me. Links are in the description to Mark's book, The Career Toolkit, as well as his app, which is completely free, Brain Bump. and his website, where there's a lot more resources for those who want to dive more into this. If you took even just one thing away from this conversation, please share this episode with just one other person who could use this info as well. Thank you for being the best part of the Be Better team. And until we talk again next time, continue to be better.